Global change of relationships. The Anglo-Saxon Bloc and NATO for the first time are in the corner, as 90% of the world's population is against them. What the war in Ukraine is changing, regardless of what happens in the fighting. Cosmogenetic are the global geopolitical rearrangements that apparently the Biden administration has not understood, unlike the Americans who have understood them very well, perhaps because it created them itself and they are all at the expense of the USA and the so-called West in general. In 1997, The Great Chessboard was published, one of the most important works of the Hawk of Washington, Zbigniew Brzezinski, which referred to the geostrategy of the USA for its final domination of the world. The actions of the Biden administration in the last 2 or so years have radically changed the chessboard against the USA, in contrast to how his predecessor, Donald Trump, had delivered it to a geopolitical peak. Thus, in the last few days, oil production has decreased further, as announced by Iraq, Algeria, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Kuwait, with the Gulf oil giant speaking of a precautionary measure that aims to stabilize the buy. Riyadh, Abu Dhabi, and Kuwait alone will cut production by a total of 772,000 barrels a day from May until the end of the year, the 3 Gulf countries said in announcements made public by their respective official media. This is a precautionary measure aimed at supporting the stability of the oil market, a senior Saudi energy ministry official said, according to Saudi's official SPA news agency. But in essence, what they did was drive up oil prices worldwide, of course, thus fueling inflation in Western countries, whose governments will have to have serious problems convincing their societies why the war in Ukraine should continue. What the Gulf countries did in other years, they wouldn't even do in a movie. And who pays for the marble? Who pays for this expensive event? Of course, people in Europe and Greece, for example, and the rest of the world, the Western countries. Iraq, one of the biggest oil producers, also announced today a 211,000 barrel per day cut in this amount output from May 1st. So that's about 1 million barrel a day cut. Algeria, for its part, is proceeding with a voluntary reduction of 48,000 barrels a day from May until the end of the year, in coordination with some OPEC members and non-member countries, according to a statement from the Algerian Minister of Energy, which was broadcast by local APS news agency. OPEC member Moscow, for its part, announced that it is extending a cut in crude oil production by 500,000 barrels a day until the end of the year, according to a statement from Deputy Prime Minister for Energy Alexander Novak, who spoke of a period of uncertainty in the black gold market. In short, we will have 1.5 million barrels a day fewer by the end of the year, and we'll see. As if that wasn't enough, the Admiral Groshkov became the first Russian warship to dock in Saudi Arabia. The ship was returning to its base when it stopped at the port of Jeddah for a 2-day crew rest and resupply, according to a Russian embassy official. The 135-meter-long frigate, armed with guided missiles, had set sail from the northwestern Russian naval base of Murmansk January 4 on a long voyage to Cape Town, Durban, and Richards Bay in South Africa, where it conducted naval exercises before sailing for the Chabahar of Iran, where another naval exercise took place. Last month, Russia said it had started naval exercises with China as well, and Iran in the Arabian Sea, aimed at strengthening ties with the two countries. In the Indian Ocean, it also conducted training on March 13. The exercise focused on anti-submarine scenarios involving a Ka-27 helicopter. Will someone say about a Russian warship, what changes? Everything. It's a highly symbolic move that now the Saudis are not interested in the U.S. of Joe Biden, and what else the U.S. in general, and choose the big bloc created by Russia and China, in which some wrongly think that only Eurasia and the East is interested in general. The whole planet is included except the U.S., Anglo-Saxons, some Latino countries, and in the EU, the European Union, Eastern European countries, and from Asia, Japan, and South Korea. Also, those who think that India will choose the Anglo-Saxon bloc are greatly mistaken, as Indians do not want to see Anglo-Saxons even in painting. Any rivalry with China and Pakistan will be settled with each way and means, as this is a central policy for both Moscow and Beijing. And in Africa, the opinion prevails that not all whites are bad, but certainly the Anglo-Saxons are, as well as the French-speaking Belgium, France, and in general Europeans, except for Greeks who never had colonies. And in Africa, they don't forget the genocides that suffered for centuries by specific people. And it is sometimes something that is planted in their DNA. As for South Africa, after Brazil, now Argentina also wants to join BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa Union, the two largest South American powers, Brazil and Argentina, while Brazil has agreed with China to carry out transactions between them in their own national currencies, foregoing the US currency. So in short, only 10% of the world's population is close to the choices of Biden's America, and 15% indirectly follow. 75% of the world's population support Russia, even if this is not directly reflected in votes at the UN. The US currently has a majority in stamps, but that is meaningless. For the first time in history, they've lost international support because of the choices of the Biden administration. The problem is that we are paying the price, not India, not China, not Africa. Putin himself declares that Africans will have free Russian grain. So we here in Europe, on the other hand, will live with the constant increase in fuel, which in turn will bring about the increase in the cost of transportation, therefore additional increases in the cost of products, which in the end altogether entail an exorbitant cost in living expenses. We're not saying that the Ukrainians should win or lose a war. What we're saying is the war must stop yesterday. Ukrainian Minister of Foreign Affairs Mikhailo Podolyak says that in 6 months Kiev will have conquered Crimea. That's their dream. Now, anyone who says these things is obviously unaware that the Russians will use nukes if they have to, and here we're not talking about a defeat on the battlefield, we're talking about the destruction of a territory which is historically and practically considered Russian. Land in which an overwhelming percentage of Russians live. It's like Mexico taking over Texas. What will happen then? The Americans would use nuclear weapons, very simple. So who encouraged this thing and why? Do the circles in Washington that caused this crisis not understand that if nuclear weapons are used, it will end life for all of us, including themselves? Do they think Russian radiation will be less powerful than American radiation and they will be unscathed? What makes them believe that there will be no use of nuclear weapons? Some must decide whether to return to the Cold War dilemma. Would we sacrifice New York to save Berlin or London? The war must end yesterday because we're very close to opening the door of the madhouse under the sole responsibility of someone's administration. But after the apocalypse, no one will care about anyone's responsibility, as the survivors will have returned to the Stone Age. And this I've translated for you from a Greek article. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support, and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box.